Hi, I'm Samuel Bilton. Did you know that Hitler was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions, and Stalin was guilty of murdering 40 million? But the United States, since Roe v. Wade was passed back in 1973...
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions,
has ended the lives of over 63 million unborn babies. Roe v. Wade should never have existed, and I'm not even just talking about morally. It shouldn't have existed because it had no constitutional backing. There was no passage or phrase that could be found to support the original decision. When Roe v. Wade was passed, it directly contradicted the laws and restrictions placed on abortion right across the United States. So what that means is that the Supreme Court never actually had the right to create Roe v. Wade, and this is why now finally it has been overturned. This does not mean that abortions are now illegal in America, but it does mean that the democratically elected representatives of each individual state will make the laws that better reflect the will of the people. That's what democracy is, after all. Regardless of what you believe on the issue of abortion, Roe v. Wade being overturned will result in the views of Americans being better represented in law. And that is why there are many liberals and pro-choicers that understand that Roe v. Wade needed to be overturned. And so this should result in celebration all across the world. But what did our Prime Minister have to say when she heard that the people of America will be given back their voice on this life and death issue? Here in New Zealand, we recently legislated to decriminalise abortion and treat it as a health rather than criminal issue. That change was grounded in the fundamental belief that it's a woman's right to choose. People are absolutely entitled to have deeply held convictions on this issue, but those personal beliefs should never rob another from making their own decisions. To see that principle now lost in the United States feels like a loss for women everywhere. When there are so many issues to tackle, so many challenges that face women and girls, we need to progress, not fight the same fights and move backwards. So that is what our Prime Minister thinks of democracy on important issues, a step backwards. Which is possibly why our government changed the abortion laws without a referendum and during a time where we were all very distracted with our first of lockdowns. But what this American decision means for us here in New Zealand is that the conversation of abortion will be brought right up to the surface where it should be. And so what I'm going to do in this video is address a couple of the most common arguments that you'll hear from abortion advocates. Starting with the one presented by our Prime Minister for the reason why New Zealand changed its law last year. And that is the fundamental belief that it is a woman's right to choose. You'll even hear many people say, I don't agree with abortion, or I would never have an abortion, but I would never force my belief on anyone else because their body, their choice. The problem with this reasoning is right in the middle of their claim. It should go without saying that it is scientifically undeniable that the body inside of a woman's body is not her own and that it is biologically distinct from the mother. And when an abortion is performed, it's not the mother's body that is killed, but the unborn baby inside of her. What the woman is deciding, therefore, is not simply about her own bodily autonomy, but rather the bodily autonomy of another. And we would all agree that people cannot do whatever they want with their own bodies if it injures or kills somebody else. Which is why murder of all human beings outside the womb is illegal. But what is inside the womb is fully human from conception. The only difference is the difference of degree, size, and level of development, and the degree of dependency. We know that a baby's heartbeat is present from 22 days. Spontaneous movement begins from 6 to 7 weeks, and at 8 weeks, the baby has fingers and toes and a working digestive system. And at just 10 weeks, the baby's heart has already beaten 10 million times. Small humans and dependent humans don't have any less right to life, and you don't kill another human being just because where they are located. Let's hear from a doctor who has first-hand experience with this sad reality.
Early in my career, I was an abortionist. I performed over 700 abortions. That went on for about a year and a half, and it all came to a halt on a Saturday morning. I remember it so well. I was doing abortions. We would do 20, 25 abortions on a Saturday morning. And the last patient of that day was a little 16-year-old. And usually when we do an abortion, when we were only doing them up to about 13 weeks at that time, there's only a tablespoon, maybe 3 or 4 tablespoons of amniotic fluid that come out when we do the procedure. This was different. There was probably a quart, maybe a quart and a half of amniotic fluid that came out as I was doing it, and then there was a lot of blood. And then it happened, the event that changed everything. The baby kicked me. Now you might think, here I was doing abortions for a year and a half, and I would see the products that I was pulling out of the uterus, the broken limbs, the torsos, the head, all the pieces of those babies. And that didn't really move me. It didn't change my mind. And it was only then when I examined the abdomen and realized that this pregnancy was much further along than I had anticipated. It really hit home, I think, with the fact that I was taking a life. She had to be taken to the hospital and removed. The baby was removed in pieces, and a gruesome procedure. That was the last abortion that I ever did.
So yes, women have a right to reproductive freedom and what they do with their own bodies. Every person does. But given that the woman is pregnant, reproduction has already happened, and it is no longer just her own body, but a biologically distinct human being with all the genetic information that they need to grow until they are ready to be born. And that baby, as well as every other human being, has value and a right to life. And so every time you hear the argument of bodily autonomy, agree and say yes, the mother and the child both have bodily autonomy and both have a right to live. Another argument for the necessity of abortion is in the case of rape or the life of the mother. It's important to note that rape and risk to the life of the mother account for just over 1% of abortions here in New Zealand. And the reason why these situations impact us so deeply is because rape is such a horrendous abomination. It's such a tremendous evil that all through common law it was worthy of capital punishment. That is because that's the value of a woman's life, and you cannot do to somebody else's body whatever you please. Somebody cannot, out of their own will, force to do something to another person's body against their will. But this violation of another person's body is exactly what happens during an abortion. And so, in the instance of rape, we should not punish the child for the sin of the father. We should not give capital punishment to children because their father is a criminal. There are so many living, amazing, thriving human beings that are alive today and would testify to the fact that they are grateful that they were not killed.
I was conceived in 1974, December 1974, by a young mum. My mother was actually raped, and I guess I'm what society would call a rape baby. The premise of aborting due to rape, you're basically saying I and women like me, children, shouldn't be alive. And to be honest, I find that very arrogant. I don't believe that we should be deciding who lives and who dies. I find it very arrogant that someone would say to me, should have been aborted, Jackie. To anyone else that has been conceived in similar circumstances, you have every right to life, just as much as anyone else.
And when it comes to the life of the mother, which has unmeasurable value, we might hear people present the most extreme scenario possible of risk to the mother's health as a reason why all abortion is necessary. However, the reality is that the number of instances today, because of medical technology, where the mother's life is truly in danger is so minutely small. But what happens in a situation like that is a life-saving operation. It's performed where the doctors of the hospital are concerned with the preservation of both the life of the mother and the life of the preborn child. Because both lives are valuable and both lives are worth saving. If death isn't the solution to unwanted pregnancies, what is? Strong, healthy families. This is because the statistics of a woman aborting her baby if the father wants to keep it and is present are extremely low. Stats out of America show that 86% of abortions come from couples that are unmarried. This is another reason why abortion is horrific in society, and that is because it gives men the chance to conceive children consequence-free and then encourage their partner to have that child aborted. Abortion empowers men to use and abuse women, and this is contrary to the popular rhetoric that women are told today. Ironically, it was all men that passed Roe v. Wade, and it is men that are given power and control with existence of abortion. As I said, if the father wants the child to live, it almost always does. But there are times when the father does want their son or daughter to live, but the mother ends up taking the life of the baby regardless. Here's a video of this situation playing out.
Help her to listen.
Don't let her
Help
go
her
in there.
to listen.
No, don't do it.
Daddy, don't kill our baby! Daddy!
Oh my gosh.
What about the rights of the father in that scenario? Should he have a right to save his baby and let it be born? Of course he does. The father has a right to life, the mother has a right to life, and the unborn child also has a right to life. And so when our Prime Minister tells the world that what has been lost in the United States feels like a loss for women everywhere, we ought to say that what this decision will cause is baby girls in the womb all over the world to leap for joy.